The mission control room at NASA's Johnson Space Center fell silent as the capsule's trajectory calculations were finalized. It was 1974, 3 years since humanity's last official journey to the moon. But tonight was different. Tonight, Apollo 18 would launch under the cover of darkness, both literal and figurative. "Final systems check complete," announced the flight director, his voice betraying none of the tension that permeated the room. "Apollo 18 is go for launch." Dr. Mintuan nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders. As mission commander and the leading space geologist on this classified expedition, he understood better than most what was at stake. The Vietnamese-American scientist had spent his entire career preparing for this moment, to explore the dark side of the moon, where no human had yet ventured. "Copy that. Control. All systems nominal," Tuan replied, his calm voice masking the racing of his heart. Beside him, pilot Duong Due adjusted his harness, while radio engineer Lan An monitored the communication systems with practiced precision. As the countdown reached 0 and the Saturn V rocket ignited beneath them, Tuan couldn't help but wonder about the true nature of their mission. The official briefing had emphasized geological research, particularly around a massive lunar crater on the far side that showed unusual magnetic readings. But the level of secrecy, complete radio silence about the mission to the public, compartmentalized information even within NASA, and Department of Defense oversight, suggested something far beyond routine exploration. The G-forces pressed them into their seats as the rocket climbed higher, breaking free from Earth's atmosphere. Soon, the curve of their home planet came into view, a fragile blue marble suspended in the vast darkness of space. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Du said, his voice quiet with reverence. "Always is," Tuan replied, allowing himself a moment of awe before returning to the mission parameters. "Let's prepare for translunar injection." Over the next 3 days, as Apollo 18 hurtled through the void between Earth and its satellite, the 3 astronauts settled into their routine. Lan An, the youngest of the crew, but arguably the most brilliant, spent hours fine-tuning the communication equipment. The mission required perfect radio contact, even when they would be positioned with the moon's mass between them and Earth, a technical challenge that had necessitated new relay satellites positioned strategically in lunar orbit. "How's our signal integrity looking?" Tuan asked on the 3rd day, floating into the command module's communication bay, where Lan An worked. She brushed a strand of hair from her face, frowning slightly. "Nominal. But there's something odd about the frequencies coming from our target zone. It's probably just interference from the crater's magnetic anomalies. But..." Her voice trailed off as she adjusted another dial. "But what?" Tuan pressed. "It's structured," she said hesitantly. "The interference. It doesn't look random on the spectrograph. Almost like..." "Like what?" "Like a broadcast. A signal." She shook her head. "I'm being silly. It's just magnetic distortion. The crater is known to have some of the strangest ferromagnetic properties in the solar system." Tuan nodded, but made a mental note to keep a close eye on the communications data. If there was one thing his years as a scientist had taught him, it was that anomalies often held the most interesting discoveries. The lunar orbit insertion went flawlessly, and soon Apollo 18 was circling the moon, preparing for the most critical phase of their mission. Du would remain in the command module, circling above, while Tuan and Lan An would descend to the surface in the lunar module they had nicknamed Ghost. "Houston, this is Apollo 18. We are go for lunar descent," Tuan reported. "Copy that, Apollo 18. You are cleared for descent. Remember, primary objective is geological sampling from the crater rim. Communications may be spotty once you're down there, so stick to the protocol." "Understood, Houston." As the lunar module separated from the command ship, Du's voice crackled over the radio. "See you in 3 days. Don't do anything I wouldn't do down there." "That leaves us a lot of options," Lanan joked, trying to lighten the mood as the lunar surface rushed up to meet them. The landing was textbook perfect, the module settling onto the powdery surface just 2 kilometers from the massive crater's edge. Through the small, triangular windows, they could see the stark, alien landscape, a monochrome world of sharp contrast between blinding light and impenetrable shadow. Houston, Ghost has landed. We are approximately 2 clicks from the crater's edge. Coordinates match pre-landing calculations. Copy that, Ghost. Proceed with initial surface operations as planned. 4 hours later, after systems checks and preparation, Tuan became the first to step onto this unexplored region of the moon. The familiar gray dust puffed around his boots as he descended the ladder. But something felt different here. The silence was more profound, the isolation more complete. They were truly alone on this side of the moon, hidden from Earth's watchful gaze. "I am proceeding toward the ridge for preliminary sampling," he reported, his voice echoing slightly in his helmet. As Lan joined him on the surface, they began the methodical work of collecting samples and setting up measurement equipment. The geology here was fascinating, evidence of ancient volcanic activity, more recent than scientists had previously believed possible on the moon. But it was when they set up the enhanced radio receiver that things took an unexpected turn. "I'm getting that structured interference again," Lan said, her voice tense as she adjusted the equipment. "But stronger now, much stronger." Tuan moved to her side, watching as the oscilloscope displayed wave patterns that indeed seemed too regular to be natural phenomena. "Houston, we're picking up some unusual radio frequencies originating from within the crater. Are you receiving this data?" There was a pause, longer than the typical transmission delay. "Apollo 18, this is Houston. We are reviewing your telemetry. Continue with scheduled activities and avoid speculation on open channels." The response was professional but carried a clear warning. "Don't talk about this." "Copy that, Houston," Tuan replied, exchanging a significant look with Lan through their helmet visors. That night, though night was a relative term in the 2-week lunar day, as they rested in the lunar module, the signal grew stronger. It pulsed through their equipment with an almost deliberate rhythm, like a heartbeat or a message. "I've been running it through various decryption algorithms," Lan whispered, though there was no need for quiet in the confines of their module. "Nothing matches any known human pattern." "What are you saying?" Tuan asked, though he already suspected her answer. "I'm saying this isn't natural. And it isn't us." Her eyes were wide, reflecting the blinking lights of the console. "Something, or someone, is broadcasting from inside that crater." The next lunar morning, they reported ready for their first major excursion, a journey to the crater's edge for detailed geological work. Houston's response was immediate and unexpected. "Ghost, be advised that your excursion to the crater edge is approved for geological sampling only. Any unusual phenomena are to be documented, but not investigated further without explicit authorization." They knew. Du's voice came through on their private channel as they prepared to exit the module. "Guys, something weird is happening up here too. The command module instruments keep picking up energy spikes from your location, and Houston is being very interested in a very tight-lipped way." "Copy that," Tuan responded. "Keep your eyes open, we're heading out now." The journey to the crater's edge was arduous despite the moon's low gravity. Their sampling equipment and life support systems were heavy, and the uneven terrain required careful navigation. But as they approached the vast depression in the lunar surface, all fatigue was forgotten. The crater stretched before them, an enormous wound in the moon's crust. Its far side was lost in shadow, but they could make out strange formations near its base, structures too regular to be natural. "Are those blocks?" Lan asked, adjusting her camera to zoom in. Tuan felt a chill that had nothing to do with his suit's temperature regulation. "They look like ruins, or tombs." The radio crackled to life. "Ghost, this is Houston. Your telemetry shows you've reached the sampling site. Proceed with collection and return to the module immediately afterward. Houston, we're observing unusual formations within the crater. Request permission to extend the EVA for closer investigation. Another long pause. Negative. Ghost. Complete your scheduled tasks and return to base. That's an order. Tuan had never disobeyed a direct order in his career. His military background before joining NASA had instilled in him a deep respect for the chain of command. But as he stood at the edge of what could be the greatest discovery in human history, something shifted in his worldview. "We'll comply, Houston," he said at last, "beginning sample collection now." But as they worked, gathering rocks and setting up measurement devices, Tuan positioned their equipment to capture as much data as possible about the strange structures below. And when Houston wasn't actively monitoring their movements, he and Lunar ventured slightly further along the crater's edge than authorized, photographing everything they could see. It was during this unauthorized extension that Du's panicked voice cut through their radio. "Tuan, Lunar, are you seeing this?" "Seeing what?" Tuan asked, instantly alert. "There's something... I don't know how to describe it. A light, moving across the crater floor. It's heading toward you." Tuan spun around, scanning the crater's interior. At first, he saw nothing. But then, a shimmer, like heat rising from asphalt on a summer day. A distortion moving with purpose across the airless lunar surface. "Lunar, do you see that?" She was already recording, her scientific mind pushing past the initial shock. "It's not a physical light source. It's like a perturbation in space itself." The phenomenon moved closer, climbing the crater wall toward them with impossible speed. Tuan felt an irrational urge to run, though there was nowhere to go in this desolate landscape. "Houston, we have a visual anomaly approaching our position. Please advise." The response was immediate and sharp. "Return to the module now. Do not attempt contact or further observation." But it was too late. The shimmering distortion reached the rim where they stood, enveloping them in what felt like static electricity. Their instruments went wild, readings spiking across all sensors. And then, through their radio, came a sound that would haunt Tuan for the rest of his life. A whisper, not in any human language, yet somehow comprehensible at a level deeper than conscious thought. "Not alone. Not alone." Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the phenomenon vanished, leaving them shaken but unharmed on the crater's edge. "What? What was that?" Lunar's voice trembled. "I don't know," Tuan admitted. "But Houston does. Or at least they suspected." Their return to the lunar module was conducted in silence, both external and internal. Neither spoke of what they had experienced, not even to each other, until they were safely back inside with the hatch sealed. "Houston is going to demand we abort the mission," Lunar said finally, removing her helmet. Tuan nodded. "Probably, but I'm not sure I want to leave. Not now." "After what just happened, you want to stay? Don't you see? This is why we're really here. The geological survey was just a cover. They knew something was here, something that's been transmitting for who knows how long, and they sent us to confirm it." Before Lunar could respond, Houston called in, their tone carefully neutral. "Ghost, we've reviewed your telemetry. All crew members are to undergo full medical scans and report any symptoms immediately. Your next EVA is postponed pending analysis." "Copy that, Houston," Tuan replied. "But we're fine. Whatever that phenomenon was, it didn't affect our suits or life support. Complete the scans anyway, Commander. That's an order." The medical scans revealed nothing unusual, but Tuan could sense the increasing tension from mission control. Their communications became more guarded, their questions more pointed. Something had changed fundamentally in the mission parameters. That night, as Lunar slept, Tuan reviewed the data they had gathered. The structures in the crater were definitely artificial, remnants of something built millions of years ago, according to preliminary dating of the surrounding geological features. and the signal they were detecting was emanating from deep within the crater, beneath the surface. A message waiting millions of years to be heard. In orbit above them, Du was experiencing his own strange phenomena. He reported brief moments where the command module's instruments would go haywire, accompanied by a feeling of being watched. "It's psychological," Houston assured him. "Isolation effects? Perfectly normal." But when Du began describing dreams, vivid dreams of ancient structures beneath the lunar surface, of machines that had waited in dormant silence for eons, Tuan knew it was more than isolation. "They're in his head somehow," he whispered to Lan. "The signal, or whatever intelligence is behind it, it's reaching him even up there." "What do they want?" she asked, the question that had been hovering unspoken between them.
"I don't know, but I intend to find out."
Despite Houston's reluctance, they couldn't justify aborting a billion-dollar mission based on unexplained phenomena alone. The next EVA was approved, but with strict limitations. Stay at least 1 kilometer from the crater's edge. Focus only on geological work, and maintain constant communication. As they prepared to exit the module again, Du's voice came through on their private channel, sounding strained. "Be careful down there. The dreams are getting more intense. I see corridors, chambers, something like a transmitter, buried deep." "Are you okay up there?" Tuan asked, concerned for his friend. "I'm fine. Just tired. But listen, I think they want to be found. Whatever's down there has been waiting a very long time." The second EVA proceeded without incident, though Tuan could feel the weight of observation upon them, both from Houston and from something else, something watching from the crater's shadows. They collected their samples methodically, pretending complete focus on their scientific tasks, while surreptitiously gathering more data on the artificial structures. It was near the end of their excursion that Du's voice came through again, but different now, monotone, emotionless. "The transmitter activates. The sleepers awaken. The message must be delivered." "Du?" Tuan called, alarmed. "Du, what's happening?" No response, just the same flat voice. "They come. Through the ones who hear, through the ones who see." Houston broke in immediately. "Ghost, return to the module now. We've lost clear communication with the command module." Tuan and Lan hurried back, their scientific caution overwhelmed by concern for Du. As they reached the module, the radio crackled with Du's voice again, now back to normal but panicked. "Something's happening. There's a light inside the command module. It's like it's searching for something." Then silence. Du, come in," Tuan called, frantically adjusting the radio settings as they climbed into the lunar module. When the response finally came, it chilled them to the core. "We are not alone. The message has waited. The truth must be known." It was Du's voice, but not Du speaking. Over the next 8 hours, NASA attempted to re-establish normal communication with the command module. Du would respond occasionally, sometimes as himself, confused, frightened, and sometimes as the other, the intelligence that seemed to be using him as a conduit. In the lunar module, Tuan and Lan analyzed the data they had gathered, painting a picture that grew more astonishing by the hour. The structures in the crater weren't ruins. They were parts of a vast machine, a transmitter of unimaginable power buried beneath the lunar surface. It had been sending its signal for millions of years, waiting for someone to find it. "But why?" Lan asked, her scientific mind struggling to process the implications. "Why build something like this and just leave it here?" "Maybe they didn't leave," Tuan suggested quietly. "Maybe they're still here, in some form we don't understand." Houston's next transmission was from the mission director himself, his voice grave. "Apollo 18. This is Director Harmon. Due to the unexplained phenomena and potential crew health concerns, we are aborting the mission. Prepare for immediate return to Earth." Tuan exchanged a look with Lan. They both knew what this meant. NASA would bury everything they had discovered, label it as equipment malfunction, or cosmic radiation effects on the crew's perception. "Houston, we copy," Tuan replied. "But we have a problem. We've lost stable communication with the command module. We can't initiate docking procedures without clear contact with Du." It was partly true. Du's intermittent possession by whatever intelligence had reached him made docking dangerous. But it was also a stalling tactic. Tuan wasn't ready to leave. Not when they were so close to understanding. "We need to reach him," Tuan said once Houston had signed off to discuss contingencies. "Not just radio contact. We need to physically reach the command module." "That's impossible," Lunar objected. "We don't have the equipment for a spacewalk between vehicles." "Not directly," Tuan agreed. "But if we position ourselves at the right point on the surface, we might be able to use the emergency ascent protocols to launch into a trajectory that would bring us close enough for the command module systems to capture us." It was a desperate plan, fraught with risks. But as the hours passed and Du's condition deteriorated, it began to seem like their only option. Houston was growing increasingly frantic, demanding they initiate ascent procedures, while offering no real solution for Du's situation. "They're willing to sacrifice him," Tuan realized aloud. "They're more concerned with containing whatever this is than saving him." The decision crystallized in that moment. They would attempt one final EVA, not away from the crater this time, but toward it, to the source of the signal. If they could understand what was happening, perhaps they could free Du from its influence. "Houston, we're preparing for emergency ascent," Tuan reported, buying them time while they actually suited up for their unauthorized excursion. "Copy that, Ghost. Stand by for trajectory calculations." As soon as the transmission ended, Tuan turned to Lunar. "Are you with me on this? It's against direct orders. It could end both our careers." She smiled grimly. "Our careers might be the least of what we're risking. But yes, I'm with you. Du would do the same for us." They exited the module under the pretense of making final external checks before ascent. Once outside, they quickly gathered emergency supplies and headed toward the crater, maintaining radio silence with Houston by claiming equipment checks. The descent into the crater was treacherous, designed for relatively flat terrain. Their lunar suits were ill-equipped for the steep slopes and shifting regolith. Several times they nearly lost their footing, saved only by the moon's forgiving gravity. As they descended deeper, the signal strength increased exponentially. Their equipment began to malfunction, displays flickering with strange symbols before shutting down entirely. Only their life support and basic radio functions remained operational. "Houston's going to know something's wrong soon," Lunar warned, checking her oxygen levels. "We have maybe 2 hours before our reserves reach critical." Tuan nodded, focusing on the path ahead. The structures they had observed from above were now becoming clear. Not ruins or tombs as he had first thought, but components of a vast mechanism partially buried under millions of years of lunar dust. Metallic surfaces reflected their helmet lights, inscribed with patterns too precise to be natural and too alien to be human. "It's like a cathedral," Lunar whispered, awe temporarily overriding scientific detachment. "Look at the precision of these joins. This metal hasn't corroded in the vacuum. The engineering is beyond anything we've achieved." They followed the signal to its source, a circular depression at the crater's center. As they approached, the ground beneath them began to vibrate subtly, dust particles dancing in the light of their helmets. "It's activating," Tuan realized. "It knows we're here." Before they could retreat, a section of the surface slid away, revealing a passage leading down into darkness. From within came a soft silver light, pulsing with the same rhythm as the signal they had been tracking. Their radios crackled to life with Du's voice. "Come, understand. The message must be delivered." "Du," Tuan called. "Are you connected to this place somehow? Can you hear us?" "I am the interface now. The bridge between... Come down. See what they left behind." Houston broke in, their signal surprisingly clear despite the interference. Ghost, we've lost your tracking data. Report your position immediately. Ignoring the transmission, Tuan took a step toward the opening. We need to understand what's happening to Do. Lanan grabbed his arm. Wait, think about this. Whatever's down there has been waiting millions of years. What if it's a trap? What if this is exactly what it wants? Tuan hesitated, torn between caution and the need to help his friend. We can't leave him like this. And we can't let NASA bury this discovery. This could be the most important moment in human history. Contact with another intelligence. Or the most dangerous, she countered. We have no idea what this entity wants. The decision was taken from them as the silver light intensified, extending tendrils up through the opening. They backed away, but the light moved with purpose, surrounding them in a shimmering haze. Tuan felt a pressure in his mind. Not painful, but insistent, like thoughts trying to form in a language he didn't know. They're trying to communicate, Lanan gasped, clearly experiencing the same sensation. Images flooded Tuan's consciousness. A civilization far older than humanity, existing when the moon was still young. A catastrophe approaching, something from deep space. The desperate construction of the transmitter, designed to preserve their knowledge and warn others. They're not here, Tuan said aloud, understanding washing over him. They're gone, extinct millions of years ago. This is just their message, their warning, left behind like a cosmic time capsule. The silver light coalesced, forming patterns in the air before them, mathematical at first, then evolving into more complex representations. Star maps, orbital mechanics, trajectories. It's showing us something coming toward Earth, Lanan realized, her scientific mind translating the patterns. Not now, but soon. Astronomically speaking, decades, maybe centuries. Houston was now broadcasting continuously, their messages growing increasingly urgent. Ghost, this is a direct order to respond and return to the module immediately. We are tracking unusual energy signatures at your location. Du's voice cut through again. The warning must reach Earth. The builders saw it coming. The darkness between stars. It consumes worlds. It will reach your solar system. What darkness? Tuan demanded. What's coming? The silver light intensified, and with it, the mental pressure. More images. A void moving through space, invisible except by the absence of stars where it passed. Worlds going dark as it enveloped them. The builder's final act before extinction, creating the warning system, calibrated to activate when intelligent life reached Earth's moon. It's showing us how to detect it, Lanan said, her voice filled with wonder despite the horror of what they were witnessing. These equations, they're for detecting distortions in space-time. The thing it's warning about bends reality around it. We need to record this, Tuan said, desperately looking for any functioning equipment. But their cameras had died when the signal intensified. I don't think we're meant to record it, Lanan replied. I think we're meant to understand it, to carry the message back ourselves. The realization struck Tuan like a physical blow. Do. That's what happened to him. The transmitter couldn't reach Earth directly, so it's using him, using us, as carriers for the message. As if confirming his theory, the silver light began to retract, pulling back toward the opening. But as it withdrew, Tuan noticed something alarming. It was taking Lanan with it, tendrils of light wrapping around her suit like ethereal ropes. Tuan, she cried, struggling against the pull. Help me! He lunged for her, grabbing her hand as the light dragged her toward the opening. Let her go! He shouted at the entity, though he knew it probably couldn't understand human concepts like negotiation. Take me instead! The pull stopped momentarily, as if the intelligence were considering his offer. Then, with startling speed, the light released Lanan and engulfed Tuan instead, dragging him into the opening before either of them could react. No! Lanan screamed, diving toward the entrance as it began to close. But she was too late. The surface sealed itself, leaving her alone on the crater floor with only the fading echo of Tuan's voice in her radio. "Tell them, we are not alone." Inside the structure, Tuan found himself in a space that defied human architectural concepts. Surfaces curved in impossible ways. Light emanated from everywhere and nowhere, and gravity seemed to shift with each step. The silver light surrounded him completely now, and with it came understanding, not through words or even images, but direct knowledge transferred into his consciousness. The builders had been a race of beings that existed primarily as patterns of energy, inhabiting physical forms only when necessary. Their civilization had spanned galaxies before the creature they called the Void had found them. It wasn't alive in any sense humans would recognize, more like a cosmic anomaly, a tear in the fabric of reality that consumed energy and matter alike. They had fought it for millennia before realizing it couldn't be destroyed, only avoided. Their final act had been to seed the galaxy with warnings, transmitters that would activate when developing civilizations reached a certain technological threshold, like humans landing on the moon. And now, Tuan was being integrated into that warning system, his mind being rewritten to carry the message back to Earth. He could feel his identity dissolving, memories of his life being replaced by the Builder's knowledge. No. He fought against the intrusion, clinging to his humanity. "I'll deliver your warning, but on my terms, as myself." The pressure intensified, the light pulsing faster around him. For a moment, he thought it would simply erase him, wipe away everything that made him Dr. Mintuan and replace it with its programming. But then, surprisingly, it receded slightly. An understanding passed between them. The machine intelligence recognized that forcing the message might destroy the messenger. It needed Tuan intact, needed him to be believed when he returned to Earth. In orbit above the moon, Du experienced a sudden release, the presence that had been using him as a conduit, withdrawing abruptly. He gasped, consciousness fully his own again for the first time in days. "Houston," he called, his voice hoarse. "Houston, do you copy? Something's happening down there." On the crater floor, Lan An had been trying desperately to reopen the passage, to reach Tuan somehow, when the ground began to tremble beneath her. She backed away as sections of the ancient mechanism began to rise from beneath the dust, configurations changing as if the entire crater were a massive machine coming to life. "Houston!" she called, abandoning all pretense of following mission protocols. "The structure is activating. There's some kind of energy building up." From within the NASA control room, frantic discussions were underway. Military personnel had moved in, taking over communications. Director Harmon's face was ashen as he watched the energy readings spike off their scales. "Abort," he ordered finally. "Get them all out of there now." But it was too late. The silver light erupted from the crater like a geyser, shooting up into lunar orbit. In the command module, Du watched in awe as the beam passed harmlessly through the spacecraft's hull, surrounding him briefly in its glow, before continuing outward into space, aimed directly at Earth. "The message," he whispered, understanding without knowing how. "It's sending the message." On the crater floor, the ground split open once more, and Tuan emerged, stumbling but alive. Lan An rushed to him, catching him as he fell to his knees. "Tuan, are you okay? What happened in there?" He looked up at her, his eyes now containing something ancient and knowing behind his human gaze. "I've seen it," he said simply. "I know what's coming." The journey back to the lunar module was a blur, Houston bombarding them with questions and demands they hardly heard. The ascent to rendezvous with the command module went flawlessly, as if guided by an unseen hand. And when they redocked with Du, they found him changed as well, quiet, thoughtful, his eyes carrying the same haunted knowledge as Tuan's. The return journey to Earth was conducted under strict quarantine protocols. NASA, working with military intelligence, isolated the Apollo 18 crew immediately upon splashdown. For weeks, they were subjected to exhaustive medical tests and psychological evaluations. Their story of what happened on the moon met with skepticism and thinly veiled threats. "You understand that none of this can ever become public," Director Harmon told them during one debriefing session, after they had recounted their experience for what felt like the 100th time. The panic it would cause. It would be irresponsible. "More irresponsible than ignoring a warning about a threat to our entire planet?" Tuan challenged. "A threat that won't arrive for centuries, by your own admission," Harmon countered. "Meanwhile, what do you think would happen to global stability if we announced that alien technology had been discovered on the moon? That some cosmic horror is headed our way eventually? Society functions on the assumption of a future." In the end, they were given a choice: sign non-disclosure agreements and return to their lives with cover stories about the mission being a routine geological survey, or face indefinite detention as national security risks. Du was the first to break. The experience had shattered something in him, left him wanting only peace and normalcy. He signed the papers and disappeared into a quiet research position at a remote observatory, where he could watch the stars and wait. Lan An held out longer, arguing passionately that humanity deserved to know, to prepare. But when it became clear that they would simply be discredited as mentally unstable if they went public, she too eventually signed, redirecting her brilliance towards subtle advancements in deep space monitoring technology. Tuan was the last to concede, and did so with a plan already forming. He would play their game, pretend to accept their cover-up, but the message the builders had entrusted to him would not be silenced. 6 months after returning to Earth, Tuan published what appeared to be a routine academic paper on lunar geology, focusing on the crater they had explored. Buried within the dense scientific language and mathematical models were the equations the builders had given him. Formulae for detecting the void's approach disguised as new methods for analyzing space-time distortions. It wasn't the direct warning he had hoped to deliver, but it was something, a seed planted in the scientific community that might, generations later, give humanity the tools they would need when the darkness finally arrived. NASA noticed. Of course. He was called in for another stern meeting, reminded of his obligations under the non-disclosure agreement. But they couldn't prove he had done anything wrong. The paper contained nothing explicitly about alien technology or cosmic threats. Just innovative theoretical physics that happened to be far ahead of its time. Years passed. Apollo 18 faded from public memory, never officially acknowledged in NASA's mission records. The lunar samples they had collected were locked away in classified storage. The photographs they had taken destroyed or heavily redacted. Tuan continued his career as a respected geologist, focusing on earthbound research that wouldn't draw further suspicion. But at night, he would often step outside to look up at the moon, knowing what lay hidden in its shadows. And sometimes, when the conditions were just right, he thought he could still hear it, the faint whisper of the signal, a warning echoing across the void. "We are not alone. The darkness comes. Prepare." On the 20th anniversary of their mission, Tuan received an unmarked package in the mail. Inside was a small silver disc that caught the light strangely, almost seeming to glow from within. There was no note, but he recognized Lan An's handiwork immediately. She had managed to preserve one small piece of the builder's technology, smuggled back to Earth in her personal effects. That night, he held the disc up to the moonlight, watching as it began to pulse with that familiar silver glow. The builder's message flowed into his mind once more, refreshing what had begun to fade with time. But this time, there was something new, a sense of urgency that hadn't been there before. The void was moving faster than predicted. The darkness between stars was accelerating. Tuan sat down at his desk and began to write. Not another academic paper this time, but a full account of what had really happened on Apollo 18. The truth about what they had found on the dark side of the moon. The warning that humanity needed to hear, whether they were ready for it or not. As dawn broke, he sealed the manuscript in an envelope addressed to the most reputable scientific journal he knew. They would probably reject it as fiction, but some would recognize the truth buried within, the same truth he had been seeding in his research for 2 decades. "The message will be delivered," he said to the empty room, echoing the words that had changed his life on that distant crater floor. "We are not alone." And somewhere, in the darkness between stars, something ancient and hungry continued its slow, inexorable journey toward Earth, unaware that its coming had been foretold, that for the first time in its ageless existence, a world might be prepared when it arrived. The warning had been given. Whether humanity would heed it remained to be seen.